Okay, guys, good afternoon. Um, on the previous video, I made a comment about that I found this paper that I've had for a long, long time, and I had it. It was lost in my in engineering documentation, and I found it by coincidence because I'm kind of cleaning up and getting rid of some things, some paperwork. And this has to do with something that happened to me 28 years ago this summer, around this time, before or after 4th of July. And it pertains to the history of the country, of this country. So, and you've never heard of this. This is something that is not taught. Uh, I didn't get it from school because in schools they didn't teach only what they wanted to teach. And there's an old saying that says that the history is written by the winners. But anyways, I was having dinner at this little Cuban mom and pop restaurant that I usually go. Very good food. And so I'm sitting there, I'm having dinner, and this little old lady comes to my table and she says, "Young man." And I look up and I was 40 at the time. And she calls me a young man. And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "Do you mind if I sit in your booth in the table?" And I said, "Yeah, no problem. So, because I was sitting in a big booth and it could probably seat five, maybe six people. And I had the whole booth for myself. So she sat at my table and, I continue having my dinner. And she's eating, but then she starts mumbling. And she's complaining and I don't know about what. She says, "John, they should help us." And she said, "They should help us." And I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, what would you say?" And she goes, the Americans should help us." I didn't know what she was talking about. So she goes, "Don't you know?" And I said, "No, what?" And I'm thinking this lady it's a little bit off her rocker. She says, "We help the Americans." And I said, "We did? Okay. With what?" And she says, "With the revolution." And I'm thinking, the revolution? She goes, "Yeah, the 1700s revolution, the 1776 revolution." And I said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "Yeah, we helped, Washington and the army." So she starts telling me this thing. And she started naming names and giving me dates. And this is back in the 80s. There was no computer to really, there was internet. There was no internet. There was just computers to do maybe bookkeeping in the first programs coming out with to do small designs, which I got one of them at the beginning there, but there was no way to confirm the story she was telling me. And she told me that in 1779, there was a Spanish merchant that would travel the Caribbean and the Bahamas selling his goods, and he will go also into New Orleans, and he will stop in all the islands. He will stop in uh, the Spanish colonies, Cuba, Santo Domingo, Puerto Rico. He would stop in Haiti, things like that. Well, Haiti, it was French. Anyways, when he was in New Orleans, he had dinner with the people that were buying his merchandise. I don't know what they were. Could have been sugar cane. It could have been, fruits from the Caribbean. I don't know. But they were conversing about and lamenting about what was happening with George Washington up north. That they were running out of food, They had no money. Most of the soldiers, well, not most, a good part of the soldiers were had no shoes, no boots, and they were walking in the snow fighting the British. And he was flabbergasted when he heard this. He goes, I didn't know that was going on. So when he got all this bad news and he went back to Havana, he would get together with the merchants, with the people that would buy his stuff, and bring stuff from New Orleans, French products and stuff, cloth and whatever. And he would say, "Hey, I heard this. That." And these people are wealthy. All these people are rich. They own the plantations, and they own a lot of the industry. So they say, "Hey, I heard this in New Orleans that the Americans having a hard time fighting the British." And there's an organization or a group, I would say, that's called the Ladies from Havana. And these ladies, when they heard the bad news, they felt sad, and they said that they wanted to help the Americans because, being that they were Spanish descent, Cubans, they were against the British. They wanted to help the Americans fight the British. So they decided to gather a collection from all these different cities and towns, and people were giving in jewelry and pearls and diamonds and whatever. And they would go convince the ladies that you don't need that jewelry. This is going to be for a better cause. Instead of having it when you wear it, you go to a party once in a while. This is more an emergency. This is urgent. We need this money for them. So they were collecting. So they told the Spanish guy, go to Haiti and tell the French that before they go to the United States, because the French were bringing in supplies also from I think it's from France. They went from France to Haiti. They were replenishing their supplies, water and everything, and then they were going to go up to the north to help the Americans fight the British. And they had to get resupplied just in case they bump into a British fleet, and they had to go fight them, and they needed their water and their food on board. So they were there. So they told the French, when the fleet comes by, to, before they leave the Caribbean, to pass by Havana, that there's a collection going on, and they want to get to go by there. They're going to pick up some funds, something in that effect. And she told me the story. I'm going, I've never heard of this. What is this story? Are you kidding me? And she goes, yeah, no, they gave thousands and thousands. So, being that there was no way for me to confirm this story because it's not in any history book that I know of, maybe some historian, some high-ranking historian knows about this story, but this isn't something that they didn't teach in high school, and probably not even in college, because I've never heard of it. So I kind of passed it off and I said, well, it's a good story, but... So then 7 months later, I bump into this intellectual that I knew. My friend lived next to him, so I was visiting my friend, and I said, let me talk to this guy, see if he knows about this. So I tell him the story. And he goes, yeah, she told you the truth. And I said, really? And he said, do you know who she is? And I said, no. And he says, tells me the name. I don't remember the name now, but he says, she is a big historian from the University of Havana. And I'm going, you're kidding? She goes, yeah. She's pretty old already. And she knows all this stuff, because there's a lot of history in the Spanish archives that is not in the American libraries. This is all Spanish things, you hear stories about, but nothing is in books. But the Spanish have They have a whole library in Spain, the Antilles, I think it's called, library, that it contains hundreds and hundreds of books that thick. And they're talking about since the beginning of the discovery of the Caribbean, of the Americas. And so she knew this stuff, right? Because it was written down somewhere uh, from back then. Uh, every every country has their own history, as you well know, and every country has their own records. The country next door is not going to have those records because it doesn't really involve, you know, or if it did, they didn't want to talk about it because now um, they kind of owe them, you know, for what they did. So they don't want to talk about it, something like that. So the guy confirmed the story, but still, I wasn't satisfied. So I was working at the time. I was working with a computer shop friend of mine. The guy's a genius, and he was a programmer, and I would help him build. You know, he taught me how to build computers and put it together. And we were building a bunch of computers. And then one day he says, "Hey, get ready. Tomorrow we're gonna go to a client, and I need to take some equipment, so you can help me." And we made this drive to it's like a 2.5 hour drive from here. And we went to this guy's house. That he's a big famous guy, money, huge house. The library, it's bigger than my living room and my den put together. The kitchen was huge and everything. So anyways, my friend is sitting there in the computer programming all this stuff, downloading disk. And I went to the library and I said, you know, this is a good opportunity to verify that story because it intrigued me. It was something that I never heard of it. It intrigued me. So I found a book, an old book, American history, and I went at it. We were there for, I don't know, 3 hours or something. I read the whole thing. Couldn't find it. But I noticed one thing, that it kind of, and then you hear about it on the programs, you know, historically, that one day the Americans are with no shoes, barely any guns, any bullets, any ammo, no powder, no food, and the next day they're marching with new rifles and new uniforms, and they got boots and everything. How did they get that if they had no money? Because, hey, that's a lot of gear, right? So later, years and years passed, internet came out. And one day I was at a friend's house, and he showed me his setup. He had a big TV on the wall. He connected the computer to the TV, and he can do all kinds of stuff on the TV. He had a big screen. I said, hey, can you look up something about the revolution? Let's see if it pops up, you know, in Google or someplace. Because I'm pretty sure this story is in Congress, in the Library of Congress. But you're not going to hear about it. You have to go dig for it. So we put in there the contribution. We kind of made up this title, the Cuban contribution to the American Revolution, something like that. And this story popped up. We printed it out, and here it is. I've had this paper with me for years. I lost it. I thought I lost it, and I had it in. Like I said, I'm cleaning up. I got a lot of records and a lot of stuff. I got drawers. I got drawers here full of plans and things that I got to go through, and any pertinent information that I need to keep. I already got rid of the closet was full. Anyways, this is the story. More or less the way she told me, but this is a little more detailed. He said in 1777 to 1778, George Washington and his troops were in dire need. The revolutionary forces were in desperate shape and near mutiny because there was not enough money for supplies. In 1780, Admiral de Grasse was on his way from France to America with a powerful fleet. There were 13 ships. He stopped in Haiti and the West Indies for reprovisioning. There, he got word from Rochambeau, commander of the French forces in America, about the tragic economic situation of the American revolutionaries. De Grasse sent Saint-Simon to nearby Cuba with an appeal. In Cuba, Francisco Miranda, that's the guy, the Spanish guy, heard about the situation and organized a fundraising drive. Actually, he mentioned it to the ladies of Havana, and the ladies are the one that did the drive. One particular group, the ladies of Havana, there it is, responded to the great enthusiasm with great enthusiasm, and over 1,200,000 pounds of silver, which is today's equivalent. And remember, this story is, you can see there's a date, 2013. I printed this out. That's a long time ago. So back then, the silver was $25 million in today's equivalent. So probably now you can probably go on Google and say, okay, 1 million. You know, it'll give you the money amount. Anyways, were collected within a few hours. This generous offering was made to the American and French military not as a loan but a willing gift. Admiral de Grasse proceeded northward to unite his navy with the revolutionary forces. The silver was divided between Washington and Rochambeau, and the army was able to move ahead towards their destined victory against the superior forces at Yorktown in 1781. Now the American people and officials have forgotten or never knew what the Cuban ladies said when they asked for the money in Havana. The Cuban ladies said that the purpose of the gift was so the American, in quotation, so the American mother's sons are not born as slaves. So let's see. It gets into a little politics, but I want to keep to the story, not the politics. Okay, it says here, Miranda, when he learned of the failure of San Simon mission, he used his closeness to the Captain General of Cuba. Enthusiastic supporter of the American Revolution himself, he knew he was a popular cause among his Cuban friends, and he had inquired among them as to their willingness to participate in the fundraising for the Admiral de Grasse and George Washington. The reaction was extremely favorable, especially among Cuban women who donated their money and their jewelry and convinced their relatives and friends to contribute to the fundraising. Cuban women got together to raise 1,200,000 Turnese pounds. I don't know if it's more than a pound or less than a pound. The frigate Le Agregat to pick up the collection in Havana, and Matanzas to sail to Virginia. I guess that's what the battle was in Yorktown, yeah. And Steve Bonsal, perhaps the first American historian in write this story, said the millions that the Saint Simeon was given to Havana ladies to pay his troops might well be considered as the foundation over which the building of the American independence was erected. Okay. Somebody else says, the pledge of the Havana ladies remained very little known, with the exception of the American historian Stephen Bonsal, who wrote, the sum collected, okay, I think I repeated that. Yeah. Okay, so now, the story here continues. General Washington, George Washington, had a dream to liberate the colonies from the English. He also had a band of mercenaries whom to pay. Let's see, the British had the Chechen. They were German. The British, they had some mercenaries. The American had mercenaries, but I don't remember exactly who they were. But they had to pay, they had to be paid since he relied on these types of soldiers to wage the war, which he felt was just as necessary. The French were here in the colonies helping out, and given that there was no money to finance the mercenaries or the war, Lafayette commanded the frigate known as L'Agregat to travel to Cadiz, Spain. So the French went to Spain to see if money could be gotten. To no avail. The Spanish in Cadiz were very kind, but not financially forthcoming. In other words, they were broke. The ship then went to Saint Dominique, which Santo Domingo was Haiti. Yeah. Dominican Republic is Santo Domingo. And then what is known now, here you go, known as is Haiti. And what was not financial, and that when Haiti was the richest of all colonies, given the enormous wealth to be had in the sugar industry. The French there told the French on the ships, nous avons pas d'argent, meaning no deal, got no money. In other words, there would not be money for Saint Dominique, from Saint Dominique sent to Washington. L'Agregat then sailed to the port of Havana to obtain water and supplies to return to Virginia. Okay, so the supplies was in Havana, not in Haiti. It was there that word got out. It was there that word got out. Our traditional Radio Bemba. Radio Bemba means word of mouth. That's what it is. On the time that Washington needed funding to stage a battle, which was at the time only in the planning stage. Women, girls from Havana to Matanzas, that's a province, to Pinal del Rio, that's another province, gave freely of their jewelry. The French even documented that they disposed of their diamonds to help Washington in his quest for freedom and his financing of his mercenary. The women of Cuba came forth knowing that this was a just cause, giving up their own wealth, their only wealth, which was their gold, to assist the love of independence of another nation. When Lafayette then sailed and arrived in September 1881 in Virginia, General Washington, upon knowing that there was sufficient financing of over 1,200,000 pounds of Cuban gold and silver and diamonds, historians pointed out that he lost his usual sedate composure. So he was always very, controlled, very, composure, and threw his hat in the air from a sheer joy. Cuban women's contribution to the cause of the American independence thus made possible the financing of the decisive battle of the American independence, known as the Yorktown Battle. In fact, it was then on October 31st, 1781, General Cornwallis of England had his sable turned over to General Washington as a sign of surrender of the English to a band of dreamers known as the Founding Fathers of the United States. My God bless the children of these Cuban women who loved their own freedom, but knew that the cause of liberty and justice is one to be purchased at all costs everywhere in the world where there is need for such state of affairs. So, and here they show a little chest with money. Now, I remember reading, let me see here. Also, the treasure brought from Cuba was intended to pay the French around 800,000 tourneses, pounds, because the French were helping, but it was a loan. It wasn't like a gift like the Cuban ladies. This was a loan that you had to pay back. So they got back their money, 800,000 Tunisians. Can you imagine 800,000? That's a lot of money. And back in those days, even now, it's a lot of money. Another 400,000 Tunisian pounds were used to pay the soldiers of Washington's troops. The weight of the 1,200,000 pounds, Tunisian pounds, was so heavy that it was necessary to reinforce the floor of the Yorktown house where the money was deposited to be shared by soldiers and sailors. So they had to reinforce. Let me see if there's anything more. I think I read in another paper that they had to cut trees, and they got the pieces of logs and shoved it under the foundation. It's a raised foundation, and pounded in there because the floor, wood floor, the floor was giving way, it was cracking and stuff because of all this weight. They probably had this big pile in the middle of the room, and it was just big heavy weight. The Spanish, a tourniquet, I think is the old 75-pound brick of silver that the Spanish used to transport from the Americas to Spain in the galleons. They used to use that as ballast. So they would take the rocks off the ship, the bottom of the ship, and put that in its place, and that'll give it good center of gravity and keep the ship upright. And they're 75 pounds a piece. It's almost 3/4 of a sack of cement. A sack of cement is 99 pounds. So it's pretty close to it. So that's why the floor was giving way. They should have kind of cut those things in the smaller ones and kind of spread it around the house. And by the way, that's the same house where Cornwallis surrendered. So this lady blew my mind when she told me the story, and I felt proud that we helped. And then also, it turns out in the other story that the Spanish already, they were sending also soldiers, because Spain was the enemy of Britain. Britain was stealing from their galleons. They were hired pirates, which they're all English, and they were attacking the galleons on the way back from the Americas. They were bringing the treasures from the North and the Central and the South America. And they would ship it all to Spain. And the British were envious that they discovered this continent, and they wanted that money. So they started stealing and attacking the ships, and the Spanish were really pissed about it. That they were talking about invading England because of it. But so they were helping the United States fight the British and get them out of this hemisphere, which it worked. It did. They have a few little islands here and there, but no big deal. So the Cubans, being that they're descending from Spanish, from Spain, they felt the same way. And these ladies, which by the way, that organization is still alive and not doing too well, because in Cuba, the way things are, they put them in jail. They speak up. These ladies don't hold back. They'll tell you in your face. And they're also dressed in all white. Ladies from Havana, they're all in white garbs. And sometimes they put them in jail. They don't beat them up like they do the guys when they speak up. So yes, my friends, the Cubans helped in the American Revolution. And what this lady was telling me was that they should help us. That's what she was complaining about when we were having that dinner. That we'd help them get rid of the English. They should help us get rid of the communists. Wishful thinking. All right, guys, so when you see a Cuban next time, or when you see me next time, say, thank you. Thank you for your help. All right, guys, I'll see you on the next one. Bye.